Hi, everyone. I think Chiara is trying to delay us starting for some reason. She's got absolutely no reason to be nervous. This is not a terrifying audience at all. I'm Matthew Traherne. I'm one of Chiara's colleagues from the School of Languages, Cultures and Societies. I was thinking when Chiara first invited me to come and speak at the start of her inaugural lecture. First of all, what an amazing honour that was, and I just had this sense of delight, and I'll explain in a minute just why that is the case, if that's not obvious to you from knowing Chiara. But I was also thinking, well, I've been with Chiara for most of her journey, and I arrived at Leeds in 2005, and I realised from talking to Chiara afterwards that she'd already been here for 10 years at that point. So to say that Chiara is part of the fabric of the university, part of the fabric of Italian, part of the fabric of languages and language pedagogy, really feels true. The contributions that Chiara's made, I think we'll hear quite a lot about in her lecture. I've had a sneak preview, which was a delight to read. But what I wanted to share really was my sense of what it is that Chiara brings that's so special. And we'll get a flavour of it, I think, through what she has to say this evening. The first thing that I would want to say is that I see Chiara as one of the great innovators that I have worked with in my time at the University of Leeds. Chiara has always been absolutely full of ideas about how to do things differently, full of ideas about how to bring things together that might not otherwise be together, and full of ideas about how to make things better for our students. And I think that sense of innovation has just always been there. It's a bit of a cliche, isn't it, to talk about innovation in universities. But in Chiara's case, I think it really means something, which is about just having ideas, not always totally sure about the plan for taking it forward. But actually, when Chiara does have an idea, she finds a plan and she makes it happen, and she makes things better, and she makes things different. And I think that's really, I don't want to say it's rare, because that feels a bit insulting to the rest of us, but it is quite rare in a university setting to find someone who is so full of innovation. I think the second thing to say about Chiara is that she's been a pioneer. And I think we'll get a sense as Chiara talks a little bit about some of her experiences as an academic, that this pioneering spirit, and what I mean by that is the way in which she has really kind of driven us forward in ways that perhaps we're just not used to, in particular around the space of language pedagogy, the study of language pedagogy, the ways in which it is both practically really important, but also intellectually really important as part of what we do. And I think Chiara's really been exemplary in that respect. But the third thing that I wanted to say, she's innovative, she's pioneering, but it's always grounded in a commitment to the human beings that she both works with and that she teaches. And so many of those bright ideas that Chiara comes up with, that I remember from the first moments of knowing her, really, she was coming up with these kinds of ideas. It was grounded in something that was very real and tangible. It was grounded in something that a student had said, or an opportunity that she'd seen for a student. So she talks about her lecture title, Growing Through Questions, I think is very apt, but I also think it's about growing through people. And I think that's something that Chiara has really demonstrated all the way through her career. She's shown us the way in how to do the kind of work that she does in a way that is always grounded in our students and our colleagues, our community. So that's why I was so excited to and honoured really to be part of this. It's a really great moment for Italian at Leeds. It's amazing to see so many people from my time at Leeds, those 20 years I've been here, but also to have this sense that we're looking into the future with Chiara as Professor of Italian and Higher Education Pedagogy. So thank you so much for letting me be part of it. I can't wait to hear you talk. I'm going to hand over to Emma.
Thank you. Thanks so much to Matthew, and it's also a delight to be here to introduce Professor La Sala. Perhaps a round of applause for our professor. It's kind of a very hard act to follow there, Matthew, but maybe just to add, you know, also on a personal note, how great it's been to get to know you over the slightly shorter time that I've been at Leeds since 2019. And indeed to get to know your family a little bit. In fact, I think your daughter has babysat for my children on more than one occasion, and it's lovely to see your whole family here and friends and colleagues. Maybe just to say a little bit about some of Chiara's more recent research, which is very much focused, as we've said, on higher education pedagogy, and particularly the role of postgraduate researchers and early career educators in shaping teaching cultures in higher education. So perhaps I think you're going to probably talk about your current project, West Yorkshire's Contemporary Italian Diaspora. So I won't say too much more about that, but alongside all of the research that you do, you're also an experienced teacher and curriculum designer, leading and contributing to Italian language and culture modules across the school. And you also co-designed the final year school module, Minoritized Languages and Dialects. I don't actually know how you find any time to sort of sleep or eat with all of the things that you do, but we're going to find out now a little bit more about that. So without further ado, Professor La Sala, would you come and deliver your lecture?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Emma, Matthew. Thank you very much for introducing me. So, good evening. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Before anything else, I want to express my thanks and gratitude to lots of people. So, to my family, first of all, my children, my husband, sorry if I got whose patience, love, and humor, sorry, have sustained me at every step. To my friends, for their constant encouragement and understanding. To my mentor, Ellen Finch, for her thoughtful advice, intellectual generosity, and support throughout my promotion application and my research projects. To Emma Cayley, for her support throughout my promotion application, and for patiently bearing my very enthusiastic reaction when she gave me the news that I'd been successful. I don't think you got that from anybody else. Anyway, and to my promotion panel for making the interview a genuinely positive experience and for engaging so thoughtfully with my career trajectory. To Nina Warderworth for organizing the promotion Shut Up and Write sessions and for helping to create the focus and momentum that made such a difference at a crucial stage. I would like to thank Claire Ones for believing in me and for her unfailing support during her time as head of Italian, head of LCS, and Dean of the Doctoral College, Luke Windsor, Dean of the Doctoral College, and Jane Dalton in the MPL for their support during and after my life fellowship. Matthew Treherne for his generosity with time, encouragement, and advice over the years. I also wanted to thank the Italian at Leeds team for being so supportive, collegial, and patient. It is a real privilege to work with you. My thanks and gratitude go also to Professor Brian Richardson and to Professor Richard Andrews, who were influential at key moments at the start of my academic career. And to my students and all my colleagues at Leeds, whose curiosity continues to keep mine alive. I would like to dedicate this lecture to my parents who are no longer with me. But whose unconditional love and support shaped everything that followed. When I told a friend of mine about my promotion, she said, "I'm so proud of you." And then she added, referring to my mother, sorry, "If Linda hadn't been your mother, you wouldn't be here." And I think she was right. Okay, I'm done with the crying now. Enough. Stop it. Okay. So for me, this inaugural lecture offers an opportunity to reflect on the trajectory of my work and on the questions that have guided it over time. This evening, I want to share some of those reflections with you. I've chosen to call this lecture Growing Through Questions. The phrase captures something I've learned both as a parent and as a teacher. Learning advances through the questions we are brave enough to ask, and teaching flourishes when we make space for those questions to be heard. That story begins at home. I'm the only Italian-speaking parent in our family, and passing Italian to my children has been an act of hope, sometimes also an act of resistance. It has meant navigating practical hurdles and at times the quiet stigma that can still surround bilingual children in part of the UK. Yet, every bedtime story in Italian, every word around the dinner table, open deepened reflections about learning and belonging across languages. These experiences have shaped not only my family life, but also my teaching practice and the intellectual directions that have guided my scholarship. As a visual companion for my inaugural lecture, I've chosen Gustav Klimt's Tree of Life. I'm drawn to how its trunk is steady and rooted, while its branches spiral upward and return. How the image holds continuity and movement at once. For me, the tree is also a symbol of connection. Its branches touch, overlap, and intertwine, reminding us that ideas, practices, and people are held together in living network. It offers a way to think about academic life, rooted in disciplinary formation, branching into new areas, and return to inform and renew the discipline. It also reminds us that growth happens through contact. The lines of our work are rarely straight. They curve, intersect, and learn from encounter. I like to see my work as a set of translations. It translates sociolinguistic perspectives into second language acquisition, connecting patterns of language use with patterns of learning. It translates classroom practice into scholarship, turning what emerges in teaching into avenues for inquiry. It allows individual innovation to travel into shared culture, enabling insights developed in one context to inform broader pedagogic practice. Finally, it connects scholarly insights with the wider structures that organize our work, aligning evidence with curriculum design, assessment, and the principles that guide educational practice. These movements are reciprocal rather than sequential, and together they shape how I understand my academic life. In that sense, the mirror, the image of that tree we see, grounded, exploratory, and reflective. At the heart of this movement is a simple conviction. Education is a practice shaped by attention, care, and the steady refinement of teaching. That principle underpins the reflections I offer this evening. My academic formation began at the University of Rome La Sapienza, where I completed a degree in modern languages, English and German, followed by an MA in applied linguistics at the University of Salford, and a PhD in Italian social linguistics at the University of Leeds under the supervision of Professor Brian Richardson. This first photo was taken after my viva in Rome. One of the professors is smoking a pipe. I love this picture. It immediately speaks of a different era. So yes, the second set of photos is from my PhD graduation. I'm there with my husband, my parents, and my two children, with another on the way. Academic life did not unfold separately from life. It grew alongside it. So in parallel with this academic training, my engagement with teaching was already taking shape. In the early 90s, I began teaching Italian A-level and GCSE in evening classes at the Manchester College of Arts and Technology, and soon after as a part-time lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University. In 93, I took up a post as lettrice at the University of Salford before joining the University of Leeds in 95 in a language teaching role. Not happening on my screen, but it doesn't matter. Okay. After completing my PhD in Italian social linguistics, my academic path at Leeds took a new and enriching direction. I continued teaching Italian as a second language, and soon I realized that I wanted to research, study this work systematically. I wanted to understand the patterns I was observing and to use research to improve my time. The challenge was time. On a scholarship contract, the opportunity to ring-fence research time were limited. The only realistic way to create that time was to obtain external or internal grants. Even then, success did not automatically translate into relief from teaching. It required approval from managers and careful negotiation with colleagues. The determination to protect space for inquiry, despite structural constraints, became a formative part of my development. Okay, so Kante, in his essay, What is Alignment, writes, sapere aude, dare to know, not just learning, but active engagement with knowledge. From the outset, my teaching was shaped by a concern with student agency, and sociolinguistics offered the productive way of enabling this. Drawing on sociolinguistic approaches, I began to design teaching and assessment tasks that brought the investigation of language in use into the undergraduate curriculum, alongside more traditional forms of assessment. In 2008 and 2009, I got funding from the White Rose Center of Excellence in Teaching and Learning, which allowed me to develop a student-friendly methodological framework for conducting a sociolinguistic survey as an assessed component of my final year module, Minority Languages and Dialects in Italy. Students were the principal investigators. They formulated research questions, collected and interpreted data, and wrote academic essays that place their investigation in dialogue with theory. In the next slide, I'm going to show you student feedback on their experience of engaging with this type of assessment. Okay, so I'm going to read from here because I cannot see it there. So the most engaging part of the project was comparing academic theories with perspective of real people whose everyday lives are shaped by the relationship between language and identity. And designing and conducting a questionnaire was new and rewarding. The supporting materials made the research project manageable and gave us confidence in collecting data. The student feedback highlights that student agency can be enjoyable and rewarding for both student and staff, but it needs to be enabled, supported, and nurtured. This work later evolved into the current school module, Minoritized Languages, Dialects and Culture from Past to Present, co-developing with my colleague Diane Nelson and team taught across the school. Okay, alongside these developments, I was teaching Italian across all levels, from beginner to advanced, and each setting became a site for careful observation. How do students at different entry points perceive challenges? What kind of feedback unlocks progress? What are the thresholds between levels? I also began to think of assessment as a form of narrative. To ask a student to write or to speak is to ask them to tell the story of their learning at that moment, what they can do, how well, with what degree of independence. If we want a fair story, we need fair prompts. If we want a rich story, we need tasks that invite meaningful choices. Looking back, I can see certain patterns becoming clearer in my work. One is attention to evidence, grounding judgment about learning in observation and analysis. Another grows directly from my sociolinguistic background, an interest in how diverse linguistic practices are represented and discussed, and in ensuring that students encounter language as something lived rather than static. A third is the way insights developed from one place travel to others, moving from a single module into program thinking or broader conversations about practice. These are not declarations of principle so much as habits of working, habits that gradually began to shape my decisions and that came together in my work in second language acquisition. Okay, so my work in second language acquisition developed from my interest in how learners make progress through error and transfer, which I was able to explore through my teaching practice with students entering an Italian degree either as complete beginners or with an A-level in Italian. Working with this cohort sharpened my attention to the kinds of errors learners produce at different entry points and stages of development. We often think of error as something to be eliminated, but actually in language learning, error is a resource. It marks the edge of current competence and the site of potential change. Transfer too is often misread as interference, when it can instead be understood as a principal strategy. Learners bring patterns from a known system into a new one, testing hypotheses about similarity and difference. So I want to share with you two extracts from a published article which grew directly out of my observation of student work in the final year of their degree, where ex-beginners and post-A-level students are taught together, taught language together, Italian language together, and which illustrates how error and transfer emerge in actual learner data. So, this is an example of final year student work which illustrates typical error produced by students who began an Italian degree as beginners. Automation of grammatical rules is gradual and time-intensive, which helps explain why ex-beginners may continue to prioritize lexical meaning over grammatical forms, even at advanced stages. So we see the sentence, Florence Mer, Matteo Renzi is expected to be offered the chance to become Italian Prime Minister, translated as il sindaco di Firenze, Matteo Renzi, è aspettato ad essere offerto l'opportunità di diventare primo ministro. So transfer of the construction of the verbs to expect and to offer in the English translation accounts for the ungrammaticality of the sentence. By contrast, a greater degree of fossilization of faulty knowledge is often observed among students who enter the degree with an A-level in Italian, reflecting a developmental plateau that forms part of the language learning process. If I had to summarize the most important lesson from this strand of work, it would be this one. Accuracy is not the enemy of fluency when meaning leads the way, and progress is most durable when learners understand the why of their choices, not only the what. Okay. A companion strand of this research examined patterns of progression along ab initio and post-A-level routes. Students arrive at university with very different linguistic histories, and the FAIR program is one that meets them where they are and makes progression possible. In 2013-14, I was awarded an individual teaching development grant by the Higher Education Academy for my project promoting the Common European Framework of References for Languages, CEFR or CEFR, for progression from ab initio to degree. And here I should acknowledge a decisive influence, Melinda Wong. Thank you, Melinda, for being here, who championed scholarship rooted in practice and encouraged me to apply for a national grant. Building on my interest in language progression, the project examined how the CEFR could be meaningfully integrated into UK higher education, showing how it provided a particularly effective framework for understanding and mapping the progress of ab initio students alongside those entering with an A-level qualification. The project adopted the approach that positions students not only as participants, but also as researchers and evaluators. So final year students from both ab initio and post-A-level routes analyze the challenges and strategies involved in reaching degree-level proficiency. Using careful descriptor levels, they developed criteria for assessing writing and speaking in Italian that reflected their learning context and which continues to be used within Italian at Leeds. Engaging students in this task strengthened both the clarity of assessment criteria and students' understanding of their own progression. The analysis resulted in two students' reports, one focusing on ab initio learners and the other on post-A-level learners, each examining the learning strategies, motivation, and challenges associated with that route. It is not noteworthy that both ex-beginners and post-A-level students in their final year expressed concern about vocabulary acquisition, as illustrated by the two quotations from the student report. So the first part is from the post-A-level cohort, and they say that a challenge, even their final year, is to acquire a wider range of vocabulary. And the strategy they apply is reading in Italian. The ex-beginner students in their final year write that they feel not so confident about vocabulary again, both in academic context and also in everyday vocabulary. Okay. The next slide shows the assessment criteria developed by final year students for evaluating speaking in Italian. So you can see how the CEFR level, well, C1 of the CEFR, is mapped onto grade boundaries. I'm showing you only an extract of the document here, as the full set of criteria obviously is quite extensive. It's from C2 to A1, but this is the work students did, mapping CEFR level onto grade boundaries. And the task was also very useful because it supported the development of students' metalinguistic knowledge. But what mattered the most to me was the decision to treat students as co-creator of pedagogic resources, anticipating later discussions of students as partners and demonstrating how collaboration can strengthen both learning and teaching. This strand of work generated publications and sector-level conversations, from error analysis and language transfer to approaches on grammar pedagogy and the role of digital resources in supporting language development during the year abroad. Taken together, these outputs affirmed that inquiry grounded in teaching practice can meaningfully inform curriculum design, assessment, and wider pedagogic thinking. They also affirm that the university is not only a place where knowledge is transmitted, but a place where knowledge is produced about teaching and learning themselves. In that spirit, colleagues and students become contributors to an ongoing evidence-informed conversation, one that recognizes the classroom as a site where scholarship can take shape. Okay. Melinda, again, sorry, I'll mention you again, but Melinda was conveyed another lesson through her mentorship. She facilitated my scholarship. That generosity made clear to me how essential it is to support the scholarship of others in turn. As former deputy director of the Center for Excellence in Language Teaching, and later through my Light Fellowship, I worked to create the time, space, and structures that enable colleagues on scholarship and teaching contracts to articulate their practice as scholarship through writing retreats, writing sessions, peer-reviewed spaces, and mentoring towards publications and promotion. And it is encouraging now to see how far we've come. Colleagues on scholarship contracts are in a stronger position. We have the Centers for Excellence in Language Teaching. We have our in-house journal, The Language Scholar. We have a director of scholarship. I have consistently advocated for the principle that scholarship deserves the same dignity as research, particularly through a period of structural change that reshaped the way we worked from separate departments, each with limited visibility of one another's practices, to a school of languages, culture, and societies, where language tutors across subject areas, languages for all, and the Language Center have greater opportunities to interact and collaborate. While the landscape is still evolving, the direction of travel is positive. These developments have been not only procedural, but cultural, reflected in more transparent routes for recognition and stronger shared understanding of what pedagogic scholarship can look like, and the growing confidence in articulating this work as part of our academic contribution. Okay. A third strand of my work grew directly from mentoring and collaborating with postgraduate researchers who were teaching, PGRTAs, often referred to as GTAs. Through my former role as subject leader of Italian, I worked closely with them and quickly came to appreciate the significance of their contribution to pedagogic practice within higher education. What became clear to me was that this was not one-way relationship. Mentoring was mutual. They were learning from me and I was learning from them. This experience made visible the value of what is referred to as reverse mentoring, the fresh perspectives that emerge when more established tutors work alongside those at earlier stages in their careers. PGRTAs brought with them cutting-edge research and the proximity to the undergraduate learning experience. They were keen to experiment and try new teaching approaches and consistently received very strong feedback by our undergraduates in module surveys. I saw the enormous potential that existed there, not only to support PGRTAs as emerging educators, but also to strengthen teaching itself through their insights and innovations. Mentoring in that context became genuinely reciprocal. So it was at this point that I began to look for a theoretical framework that could help me make sense of what was observing in practice. My approach was informed by Schulman's concept of signature pedagogies, which emphasizes the importance of teaching approaches that connect theoretical knowledge with practical application. And you have a visual representation of it. This perspective is particularly relevant to PGRTAs, who occupy a unique position at the intersection of research and teaching. When supported effectively, PGRTAs are able to integrate their research expertise into their teaching, creating learning environments that connect disciplinary theory with practice and enrich the student learning experience. So my life fellowship in 2021, Enhancing Pedagogic Practice in Higher Education through Engagement with PGRTAs, emerged from this sustained collaboration with postgraduate researchers in the delivery of teaching within the Italian subject area. The project allowed me to investigate the contribution of PGRTAs to pedagogic practice in higher education, and also to explore the following questions. Okay, how do they shape the pedagogic culture of the university? How can policy better recognize, support, and learn from their contributions? The findings from the Light Fellowship informed aspects of professional development provision and university policy, contributed to the strengthening of initial training for PGRTAs, and promoted teaching observation as a developmental practice. So I'm going to show you now some findings from my fellowship. So basically, the first slide shows the results of the survey I launched to the undergraduates across the University of Leeds during my life fellowship. It was a big survey. It was about 250 undergraduates who participated in the survey. And you can see that they were asked basically to indicate their level of agreement with this statement. So undergraduates benefit from PGR teaching alongside professors, lecturers. So we got, I think, 89%. And PGRs use student-friendly terminology, got 88%. Having contact with PGRs could help students see potential career pathways. Again, 80-something%. PGRs are enthusiastic and creating interactive teaching materials. Okay. The next slide. Yes, it is staff perspective on PGR teaching. So this is actually they are the findings from the survey I launched to staff across the university. So again, we had about 100 participants, so quite a big number across the university. And you can see there is a consensus between staff and undergraduate students that having PGRTAs involved in the teaching is good, is a very beneficial experience. So 78% of staff said that PGRs are enthusiastic and passionate about their teachings. And PGR's visibility and representation may encourage undergraduates to do research degree, 60%. And so we can see that between staff and students, there was a consensus about the benefits of having PGR-TAs involved in teaching. Okay, and this is actually, these data are from the survey launched to PGRs who were teaching, the experience of teaching, and basically the question was, to what extent have you found the following teacher training methods useful to develop your teaching practice at the University of Leeds? And you could see that at that moment the situation was quite patchy. Some PGR-TAs received feedback from observation, others mentoring, others participated in the Foundation in Teaching course. Others did not receive any training, so that was what PGR said about their teaching training. Overall, all of them seemed to be exposed to some form of training, but there was not a regular, basically, pattern. Okay. So alongside this work, I supported the scholarship of PGR-TAs through collaborative projects. One example is the special issue Digital Learning Experiences of COVID-19, published by the journal Postgraduate Pedagogies in 2024. Developed with PGR-TAs at the University of Leeds, the volume brings together reflections on teaching at Leeds during the pandemic, highlighting how PGR-TAs contributed to pedagogic innovation and continuity at a time of significant disruption. The photo there, the top, you've got, it just shows PGR-TAs presenting on their experiences of teaching during My Life Fellowship event. So this was an event I organized at the end of My Life Fellowship, and the PGR-TAs were invited to present on their experience of teaching during the pandemic. And following this presentation, we took the decision to make a proposal to publish the special issue, which was accepted. So basically, actually, Seb is here now. Hi, Seb. So you were doing some field work and you couldn't be on time, and that's why Seb kindly did this video for me, and now I need to play it, and I need your help again.
Hi all, I'm Sebastian Stroud. I am a teaching fellow in ecology and botany here at the University of Leeds in the School of Biology. Unfortunately, I can't be there right now. I'm probably sat on a coach on the way back from Ilkley with around 30 odd master's students. Hopefully that's where I am. If not, I'll be very surprised. But I will be joining a little bit later. I first met Chiara when she was doing her Light Fellowship, and she was observing different graduate teaching assistants or PhD demonstrators in different teaching settings, and from that she produced this postgraduate pedagogies piece of work where she brought together quite a diverse group of us from different disciplines, and we created this submission for that journal, Postgraduate Pedagogies. I wrote a piece called Field Skills Through a Screen, which was reflecting on teaching kind of plant identification and field ecology during the pandemic. So it was a really nice opportunity for me to kind of broaden the kind of interdisciplinary research skills that I had, but also reflect on my own practice and develop my own pedagogy, which was, I think, quite critical really in securing this teaching focused role and in my kind of career progression at that point. So I want to thank Chiara for that specifically. And what it also allowed me to do was kind of think about my own practice. So I lead a lot of teaching now, and I have a really excellent group of graduate teaching assistants who support me in that. So working with someone like Chiara has been really instrumental in seeing how I want to help support other PhD students and GTAs who are currently going on that same journey that I went through, and thinking about, you know, what makes good pedagogic support within our faculty and how can we encourage and support excellence that we see, because they are so critical to the teaching we do here at the university. So with that, I'm hoping I will see you in about 15-20 minutes. So sorry if I disturb everyone by walking in late. But thank you again, Chiara, and many congratulations.
Okay, we've got Alex actually, who could be physically from the beginning. And
cool. I'm not going to get nearly as many laughs as Seb did, but I had a very similar kind of experience working with Chiara as part of this. So I was a postgraduate demonstrator in the field of pharmacology, and particularly in COVID, I felt like we ended up being quite isolated from a lot of the teaching practices, and kind of the teachers that I did know, the lecturers I did know, were so focused on having to move their courses and things in purpose online that I felt like we kind of got left out a little bit. We kind of saw everything disappear in transition, but the bits that I looked forward to every week were getting to go into the lab classes, demonstrate with students, and that vanished pretty much overnight. And so hearing about this project and wanting to get involved in it was such a nice way of, one, kind of empowering me to actually see the work I was doing as pedagogical work and as kind of scholarship practice, but then also actually getting to see other postgraduate demonstrators getting to work together, getting to reflect on our experiences together. So thank you so much for facilitating that space. I think also you're part of the reason that I think I became so obnoxious, because it was the first time that someone said to me, no, yeah, you're a pedagogical practitioner, like you are a teacher, you're doing all this work. And I'd always thought, no, I'm just a demonstrator. I just turn up and I show people how to do things. And I think that really boosted my confidence. I think that's what made me then go for the lectureship role. And also in my role in Light now, I'm really excited that we get to continue working together on scholarship projects. So yeah, absolute congratulations for this. And thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thank you, Alex. I'm sad. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Alex and Seb. So this body of work is rooted in the pedagogic contribution and professional development of PGRTAs. However, the question it raises around support, recognition, and development extend beyond this group. Many of the insights generated are equally relevant to early career tutors and sessional teachers, whose working conditions and professional trajectories present parallel pedagogic and institutional challenges. It was from this recognition that my contribution to wider discussion of sessional teaching and professional development emerged. In this context, I contributed with the forthcoming chapter supporting GTAs and early career tutors, research insights and holistic approaches to the book Creating a Framework for Developing Sessional Teachers in Higher Education, published by UCL Press. The fellowship also created opportunities for collaboration across the university, including work with organizational development and professional learning, the doctoral college, and colleagues in other faculties involved in PGRTA teaching. These collaborations had surfaced shared pedagogic challenges across discipline and prompted sustained conversations about practice. Together, these experiences reinforce my belief that higher education pedagogy remains an area deserving greater visibility and ongoing inquiry. Beyond our specific subject area, we share core practices of teaching, assessment, supporting students in becoming independent learners, emerging researchers, and preparing them for life beyond the university. Beyond my school, I'm an active member of the GTA Developer Network, contributing to the professional development of PGRTAs across institutions. This network has been an important space for sharing practice, resources, and ideas around the support and development of early career teachers. Looking ahead, we will host the GTA Developer Network annual conference in 2027 in Leeds. Very excited about it because it's going to be a great opportunity to deepen connections, broaden participation, and continue shaping a supportive pedagogic environment for those beginning their teaching career. In my role as program leader of the Model Languages, BA Model Languages, and former BA Model Languages with other subjects, I've come to understand scholarship and leadership as closely connected practices. So scholarship shapes leadership when decisions are informed by evidence and attentive to student learning. Leadership in turn informs scholarship when the working environment makes room for inquiry, when colleagues have the space to think, to question, to let pedagogic idea develop. In my own work, this has meant allowing insights that first emerged within individual modules to inform wider program level conversations, embedding CEFR descriptors in ways that have strengthened coherence across assessments, and working with colleagues to make the pedagogic reasoning behind our choices more visible. When that reasoning is shared, when we articulate why a task is designed in a particular way, what kind of learning it supports, and how it aligns with disciplinary expectation, practice becomes easier to recognize, to discuss, and to develop collectively. In this sense, the movement between scholarship and leadership are part of the same endeavor, creating an environment in which pedagogic thinking is valued, sustained, and able to circulate. So this is my latest project, and it's called West Yorkshire Contemporary Diaspora. The project explores language, identity, and belonging among contemporary Italian communities in West Yorkshire. It focuses on onward migration among young Italian people born in Italy to non-Italian parents whose families lived in Italy for a number of years, acquired Italian citizenship, and later moved to UK. By onward migration, I refer to the process through which people move again, and to how economic factors, family trajectories, educational opportunities, and personal aspirations shape these decisions. So the picture here, just it's a project at a very initial stages. I just started collecting data, but I wanted to put this picture, which is from the participant information sheet. So basically, you have to obviously apply for ethical approval when you go out there and interview people. And this is the majority of my sample is young participants, well, less than 18 years, they are in school. And this is how I described the project to them. I want to find out about the lives of young people with Italian roots in West Yorkshire and their families. I'm doing this project because I'm a professor of Italian at the University of Leeds, and research means finding out about things and why they happen. I hope this project will help schools and communities understand and support students better. Okay. Through focus groups and interviews, I'm hoping to build an archive of narratives that will contribute to the current literature on migration and provide material for teaching and student-led work. In this sense, the project brings together the different strands of my work in sociolinguistic, second language acquisition, and higher education pedagogy. The project also grew out of my teaching on the module Modern Identities in Italy, where students' questions and discussion about migration, citizenship, and belonging provided an important impetus. That experience reinforced for me the value of scholarship that addresses questions people recognize from their own lives and that engages with communities on issues they care about. I see this project as a way of challenging perceptions of higher education as distant or detached through research developed in collaboration with communities. I also like seeing this most recent project as evolving from my long-standing commitment to scholarship that transformed the student learning experience, and from my work to support colleagues in developing and sharing their pedagogic practice as scholarship. In the current higher education climate, where increasing marketization places significant pressure on individual performance and leaves limited space for collective inquiry, this kind of work matters. It sustains teaching and learning as shared intellectual activities rather than isolated endeavor, and that ensure that scholarly thinking continues to inform students' education, colleagues' practices, and the policies that shape our institution. As a professor, this is where I see my role most clearly, creating and sustaining spaces for conversation where students, colleagues and community partners can work together, shape practice, and contribute to knowledge that is meaningful and relevant to them. As I come to the end of this lecture, I return to the idea of growing through questions or growing through people. Across teaching, scholarship, and engagement, what has mattered most to me has been creating space for questions to be asked, shared, and taken seriously. Questions that emerge in classroom, in research, and in conversation with communities have shaped my work so far, and they continue to guide how I approach my responsibilities now. If there is one idea that has run through this lecture, it is this, that growth in learning, in scholarship, and in academic life happens not in isolation, but through sustained conversation. When I think back to that early moment in my career, captured in the photograph after my viva in Rome, professor with a pipe included, I'm reminded how academic life, like any other, unfolds within its time. For me, being a professor today means carrying this way of working forward with greater scope and responsibility. The path that's brought me here through teaching, pedagogic scholarship, and community-engaged research now places greater responsibility on me to create opportunities for others, for students to learn through inquiry, for colleagues to develop and share their work, and for scholarship to matter beyond the university. Thank you to my family, to my mentors, to colleagues and students, to PGRTAs, and to the community participants who have trusted me with their story. Grazie. Thank you so much.
I think you can probably tell from that round of applause how well that went down.
Thank you.
But many congratulations on that wonderful inaugural lecture. And now it's my pleasure to invite you all to a reception. If you're in the room, I'm sorry about those ones online, you can't come. And to celebrate Professor Sala.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.